Hello, everyone, and welcome to Blogging in Theology. And this evening, I'm delighted to talk again to Dilly Hussain. You're most welcome. Assalamu alaikum.
Well, Paul, thank you for having me on. Honored to be on your prestigious channel. Jazakallah khairan, brother.
You're very kind, but I was honored to be your guest on your prestigious channel some months ago, and that was a great experience. So it's good to have you on my channel.
Thank you.
For those who don't know, Dilly is the deputy editor of 5 Pillars UK. It's a UK-based news site covering current affairs related to Islam and Muslims. It's unique in the UK. Really must support it. He's also the host of Blood Brothers podcast, which you can find on YouTube. So today, this evening, we're talking about some very, very important news globally, trying to understand it better. My ignorance was nearly total, I'm ashamed to say, until a few days ago. And this is all to do with this incredible movement that has developed recently in Bangladesh. Why are the Bangladesh students protesting? And it's bigger than that now, I understand. But that's what I initially encountered on the newswire. The media reports that Bangladesh students' protests against quotas for government jobs have escalated into the country's worst unrest in years. And in response, there's been an incredibly deadly crackdown in which authorities have shut down all public universities and cut mobile phone services, amongst other things. And what we'd like to explore today is the background to this extraordinary event that's happening, and more also, what does it mean for the wider Ummah globally? What do we need to know about our brothers and sisters in Bangladesh? Because we're all connected. We always were, but especially in today's global world, we need to understand what's happening. So over to you, Dilly, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters, friends. Paul, thanks again for having me on. I've always been a firm believer that for any Muslim, irrespective of race, ethnicity, tribe, nation, whatever it may be, if we are going to truly, in a meaningful way, connect with an ummatic issue, we should, at the bare minimum, understand aspects of the said group of people that we're talking about, our core religionists, in terms of their heritage, their history. Let me give an example, Paul. The whole Ummah is focused on Gaza at the moment.
Yeah.
Most Muslims can give you a brief info about Palestine. Why is it important to Muslims? Masjid al-Aqsa, the stories of the prophets, al-Isra wal-Miraj, and all of that stuff, right? When I started giving lectures about the Uyghurs about 7 years ago, before I even started researching into the oppression of the Uyghur Muslims, I wanted to understand the Islamic heritage of my Muslim brothers and sisters of that region. Because in that way, we can truly connect. Because it's all good and well when something's trending, we see it in social media, always happening in a Muslim country, let's talk about it, let's retweet, and that's it. But I think one way in which we can all collectively connect with each issue, whether it be Sudan, whether it be Palestine, whether it be Kashmir, whether it be Myanmar, whether it be Bangladesh right now, occupied Kashmir, wherever it is, we should have a cursory understanding of the said region and our core religionists in that said land. So in the case of Bangladesh, it's a very unique country. It's a country of my descent, or it's my motherland. It has a huge population, 175 million, the 8th largest population in the world, in a country that's the same size as England.
Really?
Yes, Bangladesh is the same size as England, pretty much the same size. England's population is like 55 or 60 million, and then Bangladesh, you got 175 million. Dhaka city is the 7th most populated city in the world.
This is the capital. It's the capital of Bangladesh.
The capital, yes. And so it's one of the most largely densely populated countries in the world. It was formerly East Pakistan. So after the partition of India, once the British had left, when the partitioning of India happened, there was West Pakistan, which is modern day Pakistan, the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, and Bangladesh was East Pakistan. And then after the Liberation War, with our East Pakistani brethren, we gained independence. That was a very sad and tragic and horrific episode in Islamic history, and a chapter in Islamic history, which I'm sure we can dedicate an episode to. Bengal and Bangladesh has a very rich history of Islam, dating all the way back to the Bengal Sultanate of 1352. It had a central role in the Mughal period for centuries, with Jahangirnagar, modern-day Dhaka, being capital of the region of Bengal under the Mughal period. For those of you who understand or know a little bit about British history, especially the British Empire, the British Raj, the capital of the British Raj was Calcutta, which is obviously India now, but the Bengal region played a huge role in terms of literacy, in terms of textiles, in terms of rice production. Bengal had always played a key role in the religious, economic, and social changes of Southeast Asia. And in terms of terminologies, Bangladesh is a country. Someone who's from Bangladesh is a Bangladeshi. Bengali is someone who is of Bengali origin. So you can be an Indian Bengali, you can be a Bangladeshi Bengali, you can be a Myanmarese Bengali, and Bengal is just merely the region. So just a bit of like info there. Now, in terms of what's happening as we speak, Bangladesh, as we speak, has been a one-party autocratic state since 2009. Sheikh Hasina, the current prime minister, who is also the daughter of the founding father of the nation, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, she has been in power since 2009. Her party, the ruling party, the Awami League Party, is an ardently secular party, and she has been in power since 2009. And this is a country which is 90% Sunni Muslim. When the nation was founded, the Republic of Bangladesh was founded in 1971, there was a quota system that was introduced. This quota system for primarily public sector jobs in the civil service, but also included some private sector jobs as well. This quota system was introduced to give protection and opportunities to disadvantaged minorities, right? So those with disabilities, women, ethnic and religious minorities. But the most contentious of them all was the large percentage of quota that was given to the family members of the freedom fighters that fought against East Pakistan in 1971. So you have this quota system, and I'll give you the exact percentage breakdown, Paul, for your viewers and listeners. I'll give you a full breakdown. Just bear with us, and you'll see how quite outrageous it is. So 30% is allocated to the family members, nephews, nieces, grandchildren, sons and daughters of those who fought in the Liberation War of 1971. You had 10% for women. You had 5% for ethnic minorities, so that could be non-Bengalis or Hindus, and 1% for the disabled. Now you can see there's been a disproportionate allocation towards the family members of freedom fighters, right?
Can I just pause that a second? Because when I first heard about this, I didn't quite get still what the conflict was about. I understand better now, having watched some videos from Al Jazeera and so on. So these government jobs are very prestigious. They're well paid. They give stability in a country with a huge number of youth, for example. Competition for these relatively finite places is intense. You know, I forget what the ratio is, but it's a huge ratio of applicants to actual places. So competition is fierce. So that this is not just some boring quota thing. This is a precious resource for the youth, which is these really good jobs. And you're saying that the quota has allocated a huge proportion to the descendants of the family of the liberators in 1971, and it's effectively squeezing the general population of Bangladesh. This huge number of youth who are now competing for a really small slice of the pie of government jobs, these prestigious jobs in a society where you don't have many jobs like that. They give the money and the stability and all the rest of it. So there's a real issue here, a real issue. I think is that kind of.
No, you're correct. You're absolutely correct in that. And you have to also understand that what's happening in Bangladesh pretty much is happening in other parts of the Muslim majority country, that as a result of such policies in place. So Bangladesh's version is the quota system. Other Muslim majority countries will have other systems which disadvantage the creme de la creme of the thinkers and doers of society. And that's where the ummatic brain drain comes from, right? When you have situations like this in Bangladesh, why do you think educated graduates go off to the West to pursue their careers? It's because there's not opportunities in their home country. So since 1971, you've had this quota system in place. If you tally it all up, That's 54 to 56%
Wow.
of all civil service jobs that will be allocated to these minorities. But really, it's the 30% to the family members of the liberators, the freedom fighters. Why? Because initially there wasn't much, contention or opposition for this kind of special allocation for the liberation fighters, right? Sure, 30% was high, but people understood that these are the people who fought for the nation. They're the ones who founded the nation. You know, there should be some acknowledgement, some concession, some support, some advantage given to them. But what happened very quickly, Paul, and this is very important, is that for you to access these civil service jobs as a family member of a liberation fighter, you need to have this thing called freedom fighter certificates, right? Now, the fraud that has been involved in the production of fake certificates has been endemic, for especially more so since the Awami League has been in power since 2009. Even Sheikh Hasina's own cousin was found in receipt of fake liberation fighter certificates. They would issue these out to their own party loyalists. They would issue these out to family members of Awami League. These would be signed off by ministers in very high office in the Awami government. It is one of the key ways in which Sheikh Hasina and her ruling party keeps a grip on the country. It's what maintains and sustains the regime, because we're talking about jobs within the police, we're talking about jobs within the army, the intelligence services, the Ministry of Defense, the Ministry of Culture and Media, comms, all the key places which are the infrastructure of any given society. Most of these jobs have been taken up by Awami League loyalists under the facade of either fake documents, fake certificates, or that they have lied and said that they are relatives. But what's happening is that this 30% allocation isn't actually even going to those family members.
It's not only is it a very small proportion of jobs, civil service jobs given to the general population, but even those that are allocated to this privileged group are being the result of corruption very often as well.
Yes,
so it's a double blow. The whole thing stinks, basically, and and you're saying this is the origins of the student protests in recent weeks.
Yes, and the reason why it was important for me to give those numbers at the beginning, it is a country that's the size of England, it's 175 million population, is because you can actually begin to grasp the disparity in between how many people are going off to university. Because look, as a British-born Bangladeshi third generation, education, going to university is such a huge thing in Bangladeshi culture. You encourage it amongst your children, you want them to become educated. What happens in Bangladesh is that you go off to university, you end up in debt going to university, and there's simply no jobs. There's simply no jobs. The official unemployment rate at the moment in Bangladesh is just above 4%. Analysts say the actual percentage of unemployment is 12%, because the average person who's even working is living way beyond any conceivable lines of poverty by Western terms and norms. Right? We're talking about millions of people who still may not even have access to clean water and electricity around the clock. Any of you who are tuning in from Pakistan and Bangladesh, Pakistan or India, the aesthetics is the same. The societal aesthetics were the same. We were all once India. It's the same feel. It's the same corruption up and down in every system, that you can't move left or right without a bribe in Bangladesh, as well as India and Pakistan. So whilst Bangladesh, if you Google Bangladesh economy, Paul, it'll say that it has one of the fastest growing, strengthening economies in Asia, according to its GDP. But who does that actually benefit? When we say that India has one of the strongest economies in the world, and it does, how many tens of millions of people are still living in horrific conditions with the lack of basic necessities? So when you hear about, yes, this economy is doing well, Bangladesh's GDP is stronger than X, Y, and Z country, the grand reality is that unemployment is rife, poverty is rife, and people are generally poor. Things like electric and clean water still isn't accessible to everyone. So just a bit of chronology now. This is a bit of an important piece of chronology. So the quota system has been in place since the founding of Bangladesh. After 47 years, in 2018, after student-led protests, that quota system was then revoked. That was the end of the quota system. In June the 5th this year, a high court reinstated the quota system to the pre-2018 percentages. So the 30% for the liberation fighters' families, the 10% for women, 5% for ethnic minorities, 1% for disabilities. There's also a percentage for districts that are underdeveloped and have poor infrastructure and so forth. They've reintroduced that. July the 7th is the beginning of when the peaceful protest started. It started in Dhaka, in the capital. The two most prominent universities, Dhaka University and Jahangirnagar University, as well as 4 other prominent universities. 6 universities in Dhaka were the first to lead the peaceful protests against the reinstatement of the quota system.
And these have been peaceful protests. I mean, looking at news agencies, they're all reporting that these protests were peaceful. There's no violence. They were just students demonstrating against these very, very regressive policies.
So things really peaked when, on July the 14th, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina came on the media, and she said to the protesters, "What is your problem with the families of freedom fighters? If they don't get these benefits, who do you expect to get these benefits? The Razakars?" Now, the Razakars or Rajakars are those who were anti-independence. They sided with East Pakistan. These were the Bengalis.
The traitors.
They're seen as traitors. So Jamaat-e-Islam back then would be seen as that. Their followers and supporters are still, till this day, pejoratively referred to as Rajakars, the sellouts, the traitors, those who colluded with West Pakistan in mass rapes and massacres and genocide. So now the students were really offended because there is no question of doubt that Bangladeshis of all stripes and colors and all walks of life respect and revere those who fought for liberation in 1971, irrespective of your religiosity or where you fall within the political spectrum. This was a politicization by Hasina to do what she has always typically done, is that when there is popular unrest against her government and her government's policies, she will somehow, some way spin it either towards Islamist terrorism or something related to the Rajakars of 1971. So that really, really, really wound up the student protest and said, right, we can't accept this. They've basically, the head of the country, our leader, has just discredited us and basically called us a bunch of traitors, because if we don't support the liberation fighters' families getting these benefits, who the hell do you want it for? You want it for the Rajakars? That's it. That's when more universities mobilized. That's when it became national. Now we're talking about Dhaka, Chittagong, Rajshahi, Barisal, Comilla. We're talking about all these major cities now. We have over 50 universities that are mobilized. Tens of thousands of students, as well as teachers, took to the streets peacefully, calling for the revocation of the quota system, but now with additional demands. And the number as it stands right now is 197 dead, more than 2,500 arrests, more than 5,000 injured, and these are just conservative numbers. We will never truly know what the actual numbers are. Internet was cut off for more than 48 hours yesterday. It's just partially been returned. There's been electricity cuts.
Curfews as well.
The curfew has been in place. You are not allowed to gather within that curfew period more than 5 people, or you will get beaten up and possibly arrested. In terms of those who are enacting this brutality on behalf of the Hasina regime, it would be the Rapid Action Battalion. This is like a private security force. You've got the Mukhabarat equivalent, the domestic security services, the police, but another interesting group, and that is the Chhatra League. The Chhatra League is the student league of the Awami League. Now, when people talk about organized crime, when you come to countries like Pakistan and Bangladesh, Paul, right, the biggest gangsters and mafias are those that affiliate to the political parties, especially when it's the ruling party. So when you go to Pakistan, it's not uncommon to hear PPP gangsters, Muslim League gangsters, even some Islamic Party gangsters, right? You even hear PTI thugs and goons, but it's not as bad as in Bangladesh, whereby literally the youth wings of said political parties, in this case the Awami League, these are thugs, loyalists, career criminals. These are the types of people that will benefit from the quota system. They're armed, they have guns, they have knives, they have the support of the police, and these people act with utter impunity shooting at protesters, stabbing up protesters, and they rule with terror and fear. And this is nothing new. Any Bangladeshi tuning into this episode will know Dilly is explaining what's been the case for decades. Let me just give you a cursory example.
I want to say, by the way, if you know, also, I mean, I read the Wikipedia article on Bangladesh earlier. Apart from all the standard statistics about history and geography and population and religion and whatnot, if you look at recent events, the human rights abuses, everything Dilly is saying is well documented and evidenced by Western agencies, human rights groups.
Yep.
This is something that is broadly acknowledged to have happened and is happening at the moment, particularly the attacks on students by state groups like police and army and so on are very well documented. So if you just read the Wikipedia article, you'll see all this documented.
So let me just give you some recent examples of how the Hasina government responds to any type of anti-government sentiments and peaceful protests. It doesn't matter if the cause is secular or Islamic. In 2013, Hifazat Islam is the largest Deobandi missionary group in Bangladesh. Generally politically quietist, generally apolitical. They focus on worship and, you know, the Tablighi style Deobandis. You know, these brothers, thousands of their members, done a peaceful sit-in with regards to wanting some religious reforms within the Bangladeshi constitution. It was also to do with things to do with media attacks against the religion by atheist journalists. There was a whole host of issues which thousands of members of Hifazat Islam in 2013 done a peaceful sit-in protest in Shapla Square. There was a subsequent massacre that ensued for 36 hours. Paul, the death toll till today numbers in the thousands. Mass graves were found on side streets. These are students of knowledge, tulab al-ilm, imams, mashayikh, you know, people who are generally do not get involved in politics or policies, but they saw it as an act of their religious faith to ask for a reform within the constitution. They were killed in their thousands in the darkness of the night. 2013 is known as the Shapla Square Massacre. Between 2013 to 2015, Hasina set up the International War Crimes Tribunal. This is a bloody homemade kangaroo court that she literally set up with handpicked judges to basically eliminate her political opposition. So she had, Abdul Qadir Mullah, a senior member of Jamaat-e Islam, hanged in 2013. Ali Ahsan Mujahid from the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, he was hung in 2014 or 15. The very famous and world-renowned Bangladeshi orator and preacher Dilly Hussain Sayyidi, rahimahullah, he was given lifetime in prison. He died in prison in 2023. So between 2013 to 2015, she had senior members and figureheads of Jamaat-e Islam and the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, the two main opposition parties. She hung their leaders, literally went through a list of them on trumped up charges with handpicked judges, and most of them got hung, with the exception of Dilly Hussain Sayyidi, who died in prison. In 2018, students protested against road safety, Paul. You know, there's students that are killed on a weekly basis because of the crazy traffic. When I say to you that Dhaka is the 7th largest city in the world, that has a population of 23 million, you can imagine what the traffic's like, right? Students are killed crossing the roads. Students protested against that in 2018. They were met with brutal crackdown. Sisters were raped. Students were raped. That's another thing which the Chhatra League, the loyalists to the Awami League youth wing do on student university campuses. You know, they sexually abuse and assault and rape female students as a tactic of intimidation. So what has road safety to do with anything religious? That's not a religious cause. It's a genuine cause to do with road safety. Even that was met with brutality. And this is just a story of what it's been like in Bangladesh since 2009. In the 2014 elections, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party and Jamaat-e Islam boycotted that general election. So it's been, in essence, a one-party state since 2014 or 2009, respectively.
Gosh. Well, thank you for that. It's an absolutely extraordinary story, and not unique, I don't think, to Bangladesh. Other countries also have very repressive governments in the North Africa area. is extraordinary. Well, what can we learn though? What can we do as part of the wider Ummah in the world, apart from understanding the cause of these this extraordinary crackdown? What else can we do? What are our takeaways from this? Why? Obviously, we need to learn and keep interested. I guess spread the word, tweet about it, talk about it, raise consciousness. Don't just ignore it because it's not on our back door, not in our backyard. But keep and although Gaza is absolutely central, but also there are other places where Muslims are suffering as well. I mean, what's your take on that in terms of how we who are not there? I know it's your motherland, but for those of us whom it's not, they're still our brothers and sisters, are they not?
Absolutely. Look, at the end of the day, the vast majority of the Muslim Ummah know that we are all focused on Gaza at the moment. Even the Bangladeshi students that are protesting, they have messaged me. We've been inundated with messages and DMs on Twitter and on Instagram, on email, saying that, look, we know the whole Ummah is focused on Gaza. All we are saying is that if you see what's happening to us here, just retweet, just share, say something, do something. We're not asking you to do what you're doing for the Palestinians, but we are being slaughtered here. We are being slaughtered here by our own government for merely calling for a reform which will allow us to gain access to jobs and security which we worked hard for. Something that is already scarce in our country. One of the basic necessities that a state should be able to provide their people, even by Islamic or secular standards, is food, shelter, clothing, and education, access to education. So we have an Islamic duty to raise awareness about the plight of the Bangladeshis, because we don't see their blood and their honor and their dignity any different to that of a Kashmiri or a Palestinian or a Sudanese or anyone else for that matter. So whilst I appreciate that Gaza is the focus, and Gaza has had an impact for many of us in the West in terms of domestic policies, in terms of censorship and all of that kind of stuff, you have to also remember, especially in the context of the UK, brothers and sisters, British Bangladeshis make up the second largest group of Muslims in the UK. When it comes to activism and da'wah, you'll find that Bangladeshis have played a pioneering role in the UK.
Well, you yourself no less, of course.
No. Put me aside. There's been so many.
Okay, no, I'm not, because you are absolutely a very high profile British/Bangladeshi person who's been and people should follow 5 Pillars UK both on Twitter and the website and other platforms to get news about Bangladesh as well as everything else. Yeah.
So we would appreciate that in the same way that Palestinians appreciate when their fellow brothers and sisters in Islam who are not Palestinian, who are not Arab, commit to their cause, contribute towards their cause, raise their cause, fight for their cause. The Bangladeshis are no different to that of the Kashmiris. That's no different to the Uyghurs, right? What's happening here is a clear case of dhulm. It's a clear case of injustice. And what's happening here has been happening for many years, especially in the last 15 years. And it's only going to worsen. This is how Sheikh Hasina keeps a grip on the country with an iron fist.
She's a prime minister of
She's a prime minister, yes, and the daughter of the founding father, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. And just to kind of simplify why this quota system is so is so important and plays such a central role in the preservation of the regime. Brothers and sisters, think about it. If 30% of jobs can be allocated to the family members of freedom fighters, and there's already been proven cases of certificate fraud, these roles and these jobs in very high stations and in very influential positions are being given to Awami League loyalists, not the actual family members of said liberation fighters. That's why you've had the various associations of liberation fighters coming out and actually supporting the student protests, actually saying, number one, we think this 30% is way too high. It does need to be based on merit, and we know for sure that many of these jobs, and these are the actual family members and very elderly liberation fighters coming out in solidarity with the student protesters, saying, no, we also believe that this quota system requires radical reform, if not revocation. 30% is too high. We also know that that 30% isn't actually being filled with genuine family members or our descendants. So it's had cross-society support. But whenever a cause becomes popular in Bangladesh, the crackdown becomes more brutal. The worse the crackdown, the more shaken the regime is. And in terms of what they are actually demanding right now, so, various media reports, and depending on who you speak to, there's either 3 demands or 6 demands. 3 demands. The first number 9, cancellation of the existing quota system for government jobs, right? So revocation. Let's take it away like it was. Things were absolutely fine before June the 5th. Provision of the quota at fair rates to minority groups and disabled people. So, okay, let's have a quota system, but let's get rid of the existing one, and let's actually have a proportionate and fair system where underrepresented and disadvantaged minorities do actually get opportunities within the civil service as well as certain private sector jobs, but not 30%. So I think the percentage that was being discussed was somewhere between 5 to 10, not 54. Right, which is outrageous. And passing a new law in Parliament which establishes a new quota system for a maximum of 5% of total jobs. But a more extended demands list, Paul, states the following, and this is very interesting. The Prime Minister must apologise to the nation for the killing of students. Tough chance for that. The resignation of the Home Minister Asad Zaman Khan Khamal, Road Transport and Bridges Minister Obaidul Qadar. These are the guys who are overseeing the crackdown. These are the guys who manage and order the police, RAB, and all the other security forces. Dismissal of the Deputy Inspector General, DIG, Police Commissioner and Superintendent of Police in areas where students have been killed. Number 4, the resignation of the Vice Chancellors of Dhaka University, Jahangir University and Rajshahi universities. Why these 3 universities? Because these 3 universities are believed to have colluded with regime forces in trying to quell these protests, where universities are supposed to be a space for student expression.
This reminds me so much of what's been going on in the United States and other places like Columbia University and others, where pro-Palestinian students have been cracked down by their own universities, the vice university, and you get this extraordinary. These are supposed to be places of student protest with great sort of a history going back to the Vietnam War and the protests about, and now we're actually cracking down on people who are protesting against genocide. I mean, you almost couldn't make it up. There's an awful kind of symmetry going on here. And
there is,
and Bangladesh and parts of Europe as well.
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at, there's this perception that Western universities are the usual place for such expressions of such causes of justice and so forth. No. In Egypt, universities were also the places, in Bangladesh, in Pakistan, so we know that's happening in the East and the West. Imagine you have in the West student encampments protesting against a genocide that's taken place. We're now slowly approaching a year, Paul, and you have now in one of the most densely populated countries in the world, one of the most highest Muslim populated countries in the world, students are merely protesting to say that if you're going to send us off to universities, for crying out loud, give us at least a running opportunity or a chance to have a job in the civil service, for crying out loud. If we can't get these jobs, then who the hell's going to get these jobs? And then do you blame us for then leaving the country en masse to then search and pursue our careers elsewhere? So amongst the other demands, the families of the grieving and the deceased should be compensated. Prohibition of partisan student politics on all campuses. All schools, colleges, universities, and student halls should be opened up again for students. Guarantee that a student's participation in the protest does not cause any harm to their academic future. So these are 9 demands. If you were to ask me, Dilly, how many of these demands do you think the Hussain government will deliver and enact? I would say they'd be fortunate to even get 1. And this is the truth, right? First of all, Sheikh Hussain is not going to apologize, let alone stand down, because that's another call that's been the case for the last 3 to 5 days. Since the violence has peaked and worsened, there's now calls for Hussain to step down. She's not stepping down. Her kursi, her throne, has been secured for 15 years, and ensuring that the quota system remains the way it is further cementing of her regime by emplacing loyalists in key civil service jobs. The arrest of key ministers, the equivalent of our Home Secretary, it's not going to happen. The arrest and the prosecution, and any type of meaningful accountability of these very senior, state officials is not going to happen. The Met Police Commissioner, the equivalent, they're calling for their resignation. They're calling for them to be held to account on criminal charges as well. Do I believe that any of these demands are going to be met? Sadly not. Do I pray to Allah Azza wa Jal that all these demands are met? Absolutely, and we should say Ameen to that. But just going back to the point, Paul, about why should we care about what's happening in Bangladesh? Let's take it back to basics. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, verily the believers are our brothers. Yeah, al-mu'minun al-ikhwa. We know of the famous hadith that we always mention to each other. The parable of the believers is like that of the body. When one body is in pain, the rest of the body responds in restlessness and fever. We know that lying is a major sin, but in exceptional circumstances, you're allowed to lie. One of them situations being reconciling between two Muslim brothers. So what I'm trying to emphasize here is how paramount and how central Islamic brotherhood and the ummatic mindset is within our faith, right? So much so that the Prophet ﷺ allocated and dedicated a segment of it in his final sermon. There are so many examples in the Quran and in the Sunnah of why the affairs of the believers is one. There's the different variations and narrations of this hadith, that the one who wakes up and does not think of the affairs of the Ummah is not from us. The one who goes to sleep without thinking of the affairs of the Ummah is not from us, right? So just based on that, whatever is happening to your brothers and sisters in Bangladesh or elsewhere is an issue for you to raise awareness, especially if you have a platform, especially if you have access to internet, something that our brothers and sisters in Gaza and recently in Bangladesh and in Pakistan against the anti-government protests there, that it gets cut off. Why do regimes cut off internet, brothers and sisters? It's to disconnect them from the outside world. It's to prevent them from getting their message out to the outside world. So if we have a platform, we have social media, we've spoken for the Palestinians, for the Kashmiris, for the Uyghurs, for the Sudanese, we have to speak about our brothers and sisters in Bangladesh. And, purely based on that Islamic principle, we have to. We're not telling you to go out of your way. Even the Bangladeshis are not even asking you to go out of your way in the same way we have done for the Gazans and the Palestinians. What they are saying is, think of us, do something for us. Now, that's all based on what we can do within our own remit, right? Paul, you have a channel, mashallah, you've chosen to discuss it. I made a video on 5 pillars and we're going to continue talking about it. For those
very,
of you,
very grateful you have, because you stepped up and you agreed to do this tonight, and it's so important. I mean, I've heard about this. People have been commenting on social media platforms, and I thought I've really got to get to grips with this. Got to understand it. Got to get the news. Find out what's going on. And this is my very small attempt to share this information, thanks to you, Dilly. And I do urge people also to follow 5 Pillars UK on Twitter, you have a website and the other platforms as well, to keep up to date about what's going on from a Muslim news agency. It's important.
I'm going to take this opportunity on your channel to actually apologize to my brothers and sisters in Bangladesh for actually being late on the mark. I actually first commented and tweeted on the student-led protests maybe 4 to 5 days after they actually started. So may Allah forgive me, and brothers and sisters who are watching from Bangladesh, forgive your brother, especially you. You relied on me being someone from your motherland. I was late off the mark, but inshallah we're bang on it, and we're going to do all that we can to get your message across. But for those of us who are just your average social media users, if there's hashtags that are trending, if there's cover pics and filters that you can use, talk about it, converse with your Bangladeshi brothers and sisters. And another thing, I always think about this, right, Paul? If you are someone who has a Bangladeshi friend who has helped on other ummatic issues, especially in the UK, you'll always find Bangladeshis involved in non-Bangladeshi related issues on the basis of Islamic brotherhood. Return that brotherhood to us. That's what we are. We're one. We're one. We at least try to aspire towards being that kind of one global ummah. So our affairs should affect one another for sure. Certain issues will take a higher precedent and priority than others. That could boil down to culture, ethnicity, nationality, your own actual heritage and history. But what's happening in Bangladesh at the moment is actually very reflective of the politics of the region, actually, Paul. If we now, scope out of Bangladesh and actually look at Bangladesh and what it is today, what it was founded upon, and what was its history. Bangladesh was a country which was a part of the British Raj. It was part of the Indian subcontinent. It was a part of India. My grandfather always said to me, the irony, I lived under the British. I then was an Indian. Then I was an East Pakistani. And then I was a Bangladeshi. And then when I came to the UK, I was back to being a British again. Do you understand, Paul? So
that's extraordinary.
It is. So, you know, but in terms of the corruption at every level of society, it's so endemic. I cannot begin to describe to you how nothing can be done in Bangladesh, very similar to Pakistan and India and other countries, without a bribe. It's not what you know, it's who you know.
And both, this is so un-Islamic. I mean, but bribery and corruption is completely against the ethos and the teaching of Islam. And this is why it's such a sad story in a 90% Sunni Muslim majority country that this should be the case. And it's one of the great things that needs to be rectified in that part of the world, I think.
Pete, there's also a misconception that as a result of the Pakistan Civil War or the Independence Liberation War of 1971, that somehow the Pakistan of today is more Islamic as a nation state. I know that's a lot of terminologies used there, and some of our kind of academic thinkers would have a lot to say about it. But I'm talking about the outward religiosity of Pakistan is always easily identifiable than Bangladesh. But Bangladesh is an equally proud Sunni Muslim country that has rich Islamic history and heritage and roots, you know? So in that regard, it's the student protests of today. Bangladesh took to the streets over Palestine. Bangladesh took to the streets over Kashmir. Bangladesh took to the streets over the caricatures of the Prophet ﷺ. Bangladeshis are always taken to the streets. They take to the streets whenever there is an ummatic cause. You know, all you have to Google is put an Islamic cause happening somewhere around the world and put protest Bangladesh. Alhamdulillah, I'm proud to say that my parents, we originate from a country and a land where they feel on ummatic issues, right? So we're here where we arguably have way more freedoms and way more access to speak freely and to advocate on their behalf. We actually have a duty to speak. Bangladesh as a country is surrounded by India. I mean, in the most crudest of terms, some have even described Bangladesh as a vessel state for India. We share a border with India. If you look at Bangladesh on a map, so let's say my fist is Bangladesh, India covers it pretty much all the way around, east, north, and west. It shares a small border with Myanmar in the southeast.
It's China?
No, just
not
China. We're pretty close to China, but we'd have to cross to India to get to China.
Oh, I see. Right.
We 80 to 90% border west, north, east, surrounded by India, small border with Myanmar, with the Bay of Bengal on the south. A lot of Bangladesh's, if not entirely Bangladesh's foreign policy is dictated according to the whims of New Delhi and India. You know, most of the trade and the export and the import is done through India, right? Sure, Bangladesh looks for different opportunities with China and so forth, but it has, since its founding, since its independence, has been heavily reliant on India. And therefore, there is intelligence sharing. We also know how India, whether it is the Congress Party or, of course, the recent Hindutva BJP regime of Narendra Modi, we know exactly what their attitudes are towards Islam, let alone political Islam, just Islam and Muslims in general. That permeates and resonates pretty much in the same way with the Hasina regime, an ardently proud, secular country, which always periodically reminds the country that we are a secular nation. And here and there, they will always try to water down the constitution, a colonial British constitution that was just kind of given some dressing to kind of cater for Bangladesh and some Muslimness. Other than that, the Awami League Party will always seek attempts to de-Islamize whatever Islam remains in this secular nation state. So India plays a huge role in what happens in Bangladesh. There are Indian raw agents within the infrastructure of the Bangladeshi state. Not many people like to talk about this. It is unsafe for journalists, activists, family members of that are related to senior Bangladeshi Nationalist Party or Jamaat-e Islam to travel to Bangladesh. The Hasina regime has beaten up British Bangladeshis before, has imprisoned British Bangladeshis before. The famous charity fundraiser, Barrister Razwan, got beaten up he's on Islam Channel and Channel S and TV1. He got beaten up at the airport by government forces. This is a government that doesn't give a rat's. They will beat you up. They will imprison you. They will hold you ransom. Their thugs will kidnap you from the villages. And they exist in every part of society, from the rural farmlands of Bangladesh to the inner cities, to all the districts. They are there in the police. They are there in all the civil service jobs, in hospitals, in the army, in the in universities, in colleges. I'm talking about the Chhatro League, the Awami League's youth wing, and their loyalist thugs and goons. These are armed, protected people by the police, and they rule with terror. And I'm saying this in no kind of like over-exaggerating way.
No, this is, as I say, in my very amateur way, having read the Wikipedia article on Bangladesh, this is well evidenced and well known by various Western human rights organizations. This is just not, it's not anecdotal. This is very
we're talking
well documented, unfortunately, by many agencies over a period of many years as well. This is not a recent thing.
Of course, we're talking about kidnappings. We're talking about ransoms and hostages. We're talking about extortion. We're talking about rape. We're talking about murder. We are talking about, these are not state officials. Not that it would be okay. It would be absolutely unacceptable and horrific, even if it was done by state institutions. We're talking about plain clothed civilians who are members or loyalists to the ruling party, and they reign with terror. And it is through them in which the Hasina government and the Awami League party ensure that there is little to no opposition, meaningful opposition to their policies. And the quota system is such a big thing because it is one of the key ways in which she maintains and preserves and protects her throne and her regime.
Gosh. Well, there's a lot to process there, particularly if one like myself was very unfamiliar with the issues. But I'm extremely grateful to Dilly for taking time out of your very busy schedule to share your expertise on this as a professional journalist, as someone for whom Bangladesh is your motherland, as you call it, and this encourages us all to maintain our awareness of what's happening in the country, as well as to tweet or retweet or share information about it, because as you said, we've said, Islamically, these are our brothers and sisters, they're part of the family, and so we must look to them, and even if we can't physically do much, at least be aware of their plight and support them in what little way that we can. So once again, thank you very much indeed.
Can I give some parting comments?
Oh, please.
Let me, brothers and sisters, those of you who have been to Hajj or Umrah and you go to Makkah and Medina, who keeps the haram clean? It's Bangladeshi laborers, right? It's Bangladeshi laborers that look after the haram, Masjid al-Nabawi, Masjid al-Haram, the Kaaba Sharif. You see them. These are people who love the Ummah, honestly, right? As much as they love Brazil and Argentina in football, they also love the Ummah. They love Palestine. You know, people forget that in the 1967 Six-Day War, obviously it was East Pakistan at the time, but there were Bengali fighter pilots that fought against Israel in the 1967 war. There are memorabilia stamps dedicated in Bangladesh dating back to the 70s to the liberation fighters of Palestine and Masjid al-Aqsa, you know? So at the end of the day, all issues pertaining to Ummah, we should see it as our own. And I want to just wrap up on this because I always want to give, practical do's that you can do. So we've already spoken about social media, posting, resharing, retweeting. Fantastic. I think as a bare minimum, that's what we should be doing. We should also be writing to our MPs. Now, will that change anything? Very likely not. If an MP decides to raise it during Prime Minister's questions or in the Commons, fantastic. Even further PR, public relation, and pressure mounting in terms of soft power and soft pressure. But we should write to our MPs, especially if your MP is a Muslim, especially if your MP is of Bangladeshi origin. I think we have 4 or 5 of them, right? As useless as 3 of them are, but you still should fulfill the duty of what you can do in writing to your MP and saying, we would like you to raise this issue urgently in the House of Commons with regards to the repressive and brutal crackdown on peaceful student protesters across Bangladesh, of which Bangladeshis make up the largest ethnic minority, I think the third largest in the UK. Please, can you talk and advocate on our behalf? Bangladeshis, if you have family members who are police officers, are in the army, work in government institutions, work in the civil service, are faith leaders, imams, ulama, if they happen to be even members of the Awami League, Paul, this may come as a surprise to you, the Awami League party also has scholars, also have men with beards who pray with the sign of sujood on their forehead, believe it or not. So brothers and sisters, if you have family members that are members, loyal, affiliated to the ruling party, tell them this is dhulm, this is unacceptable, this should stop, this is not good for the country. There is no way in which this will benefit the country. Today, it's not your children. Tomorrow, it could be your children protesting against something, an opportunity that they're seeking. Do you think this is right? Do you think it's fair? From an Islamic basis, from a secular basis, do you think it's fair? Forget about Islam if you don't want to talk about Islam, but how do you think this looks to the outside world? Students who just want an equal opportunity in accessing jobs after working tirelessly through the university system. Do you think it's right to be beating them and shooting at them and killing hundreds of them, arresting thousands of them? Speak to them, speak to people of influence within the Bangladeshi society and try to convince them, engage with them, try changing their ideas, get them to speak to their superiors, obviously being safe at the same time, because we know that saying the wrong thing to the wrong person can get you arrested and imprisoned. It literally is that bad, Paul. In terms of non-Bangladeshi Muslims, right? Ask your Bangladeshi brothers and sisters, what's going on? Take an interest to find out why is it happening? What is happening? If you don't know much about Bangladesh, go find out about what Bangladesh is. Similarly, when I had to do some research on who the Uyghurs are, do the same for Bangladeshis. If you can start any kind of unified online petitions, do it. If you can create content in terms of vlogs and commentaries, do it. Any type of engagement, any type of discourse that can take place, whether it's events in masajid, ISOC events, everything and anything would be much appreciated by the students who are protesting right now and are literally putting their lives at danger. Hundreds have died, brothers and sisters. Wallahi, I sent Paul some footage earlier on today, just for him to get an understanding of what's happening. Many of you would have seen pictures of students with their face blown off with live rounds, you know, parents mourning. 197 is just the official number. Those of you from Bangladesh, as well as Pakistan and India, know that when the governments give these numbers, it's usually quadruple or times 5 that number, right? In the same way that during the Rabaa al-Adawiyya massacre in 2014, when the Sisi regime cracked down on supporters of Muhammad Morsi, rahimahullah, the official number was like 1,200, when we know thousands were killed. Thousands were killed. These regimes don't have to disclose official statistics or let international monitors or more people come in. So this is a situation that we're in, and you know when the internet gets cut off in any place, what's about to go down or what's going to go down. You know, we know the Israelis and the Zionists are doing it to our brothers in Gaza, the Indian occupiers do it in Kashmir, and our own governments do it to ourselves and in the Muslim majority countries when they sense that their regime or their power is being brought to question, or the legitimacy is being brought to question. And at the end of the day, and I'll conclude on this hadith. The Prophet ﷺ was asked by one of the companions, Ya Rasulullah, what is the best type of jihad? What is the best form of jihad? Rasulullah ﷺ said, Wa kalimat al-haq, a word of truth to the tyrannical ruler. Now, we can debate whether Sheikh Hasina constitutes as a tyrannical ruler. I know where I stand on this matter. You can make your own decision and your own conclusion once you've done the research. I know many Bangladeshis already have a said near consensus position on that. If you deem that to be the case, or if you deem that killing unarmed peaceful protesters by state institutions like the police and RAB and so forth, these are institutions that are supposed to protect the people, are supposed to protect the future intellectuals of a said country. If you think that beating them up, killing them, shooting them, sexually assaulting the female students, imprisoning them, detaining them is tyrannical and oppressive, then you even have a religious duty to actually do something and speak out. If you can't change something with your hand, hey, you got double hadith. If you can't change something with your hand, brothers and sisters, speak out against it. If you can't speak out against it, the very least you can do is hate it from within. And I know many of us, if not all of us sitting in the West, can do a lot more than just hating it from within. And Allah knows best. And of course, keep your brothers and sisters in Bangladesh, in Gaza, and everywhere else in your du'as, that Allah alleviates their oppression and their hardship and replaces it with security and freedom and justice. Ameen.
Ameen. Ameen. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dilly. Fantastic. We'll keep an eye on this, and inshallah, maybe you can come and report back in the future about any further developments. So thank you very much again for your time, and until next time.
Jazakallah khair, bro. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.